Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. This is docket number 29849, Georgia Power Company's application to adjust rates to include reasonable and prudent plant Vogtle units 3 and 4 cost. This is our second day. Start by calling for appearances. Georgia Public Service Commission.
Good morning, Preston Thomas and Jenny Davis on behalf of Public Interest Advocacy staff.
Georgia Power Company.
Good morning, Steve Hewitson, Allison Pryor, and Michael Fu on behalf of Georgia Power Company.
Concerned ratepayers of Georgia.
Steve Prenovitz, Concerned Ratepayers of Georgia.
Georgia Association of Manufacturers. No, Mr. Jones told us yesterday he couldn't be here today. Georgia Interfaith Power and Light and Partnership for Southern Equity.
Morning, Commissioners. Bob Sherrier and Jennifer Whitfield on behalf of Georgia Interfaith Power and Light and Partnership for Southern Equity.
And Ms. Coyle mentioned yesterday she was not able to be here today either. That's Georgia Watch. Resource Supply Management. Not present. Southern Alliance for Clean Energy.
Ryan Jacob here to represent Southern Alliance for Clean Energy.
Are there any housekeeping matters to take up at this time? All right, we'll move on to public witnesses. I have a sign-up sheet, and I'm just going to go down the list. I just want to say thank y'all for taking the time to be here today. And as I mentioned yesterday, thanks to all those who have written us letters and emails and everything that couldn't necessarily be here in person. We'll start with Addison Cheney. Good morning. You can just tell us who you are, and again,
Right.
thank you for being here.
Hello, Chairman and members of this commission. My name is Addison Cheney. I am a member of a national homeschool debate league, and this year our topic is federal energy policy. I'm sure others have and will talk about the many benefits of nuclear energy versus other energy sources, but I wanted to talk about the importance of nuclear energy for our national security. In the last 30 years, the U.S. has only built 2 nuclear reactors, units 3 and 4 at Plant Vogtle. By contrast, China built 45, Russia built 12, with more on the way for both of those nations. These are just the ones that they built in their own countries. It's the ones that they're building in other countries that are the real issue. Russia and China's nuclear companies are state-owned and are treated as extensions of their governments. They use these companies to gain influence over other countries. These companies use predatory styles of doing business to get contracts. For example, Russia's state-owned company Rosatom bids lower than anyone else on reactor projects, and once it is built, they provide everything needed to run it, such as personnel, nuclear fuel, waste disposal, and maintenance. They did this with Turkey's Akuyu plant that just opened, and many others. As for China, it secured nuclear plant contracts in Romania, Pakistan, Argentina, Iran, and even the UK. In addition to this, China and Russia will offer loans to the governments of countries to help pay for the projects that they are building and other projects. Those loans are concerning as well. For example, in 2017, China forced Sri Lanka to give it control over its Port Hambantota for about 100 years after Sri Lanka couldn't pay China back for infrastructure project loans. China or Russia could easily use similar tactics with nuclear energy loans. These contracts and loans create decades-long relationships with China and Russia and give China and Russia great influence over these countries. In addition to that threat, reactors and plants built by China and Russia likely aren't as safe. China and Russia don't have the same safety standards as the US does, and they don't always follow international standards. Many of the countries they work with would be especially vulnerable if something were to happen to their reactor. And in addition to this, some of these countries don't prioritize the threat of nuclear terrorism. It would be far better if the US were to have influence in these countries. It's not only good energy policy to support nuclear energy here at home, it's also vital to our national security to maintain US influence around the world. If we were to give up on nuclear energy at home and abroad, we would relinquish that field to China. We cannot afford to do that. It's in our best interest to support nuclear energy one step at a time, one investment at a time, one project at a time, and one partnership at a time. Considering all this, I sincerely thank this commission for its support of nuclear energy in Georgia. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I have one question though. Have you ever had a chance to tour a nuclear power plant?
No, sir.
Well, I think that you are deserving to, because it sounds like you are well studied on the matter, and I would hope that you get that opportunity.
Thank you.
Are you interested in an internship at all?
I was going to see if she wanted to run for the commission.
Where do you live? My assistant is coming down to get your contact information. I'm serious. Very impressive. Have you ever gone to Teen Pack?
No, sir.
The youth organization here at the state capitol?
No, sir.
I hear it's really good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow.
Well done.
Kenny Mullins.
Hey, Kenny, you got to follow that, bud.
That's tough, isn't it?
It's good to see our young future coming up and being so knowledgeable. Commissioners, good morning. It's good to be here with you again, and this time in celebration of the completion of Plant Vogtle. I'm Kenny Mullins. I'm the business manager for IBEW Local 613, as well as the newly elected board member for the Georgia AFL-CIO. It's my honor today to be representing all of Georgia's craft labor in my remarks. If I may, I'd like to start with a brief story. It's not a story of just one person, but of nearly 8,000 workers across more than a decade. You see, these workers accomplished a task that others across the nation never believed would happen. In the early days of what was called a nuclear renaissance, there was literally a waiting list for fabrication of the reactor vessels and a backlog at the regulatory agency in Washington that would permit all projects on the drawing boards. And then those grand ideas of a renaissance began fading, but not the commitment of craft labor in Georgia. When delays occurred in the early days of the nuclear project, craft labor kept rod busting, welding, digging, backfilling, while the craziness around our project played out. When Westinghouse went bankrupt in the middle of the night, craft labor, men and women, continued to work, kept their tool belts buckled. When there were disagreements among the co-owners of our project, my members kept at it. When heavy lift cranes moved the top head onto Unit 3, waving an attached American flag. Many of the members with noble military service saluted. When the fuel was loaded, they cheered. And when it went commercial, a few of my strong brothers and sisters got emotional. See, they got emotional because they were ending an era of a completion of a project that was like none other in our state of Georgia. They formed relationships on that job. They bonded with their co-workers. They went through things in life together on that project. And to be working on a state-of-the-art facility and to see it to come complete, words couldn't describe. So I stand here today to express the collective pride of the men and women who brought this project to completion. Their lives have been changed for the better, and Georgia is better for their work. And with a sincere thank you, I only have one ask. Let's do it again. So we stand ready. Our workers are ready, and they're willing, and they're ready to go back to work. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Mullins, thank you. And thank you to the thousands of you brothers and sisters. It's just like you just said in your remarks, and we've said it before. When the Westinghouse bankruptcy occurred, if it wasn't for you and your brothers and sisters, we wouldn't be where we are today. There's no question about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You did some heavy lifting with that 750-ton cap that went on.
We did. We did. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kenny.
John Kotick. If I didn't say it right, please correct.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is John Kotek. I'm Senior Vice President for Policy and Public Affairs at the Nuclear Energy Institute, the trade association for the commercial nuclear industry in the U.S. I'm here today to thank and congratulate the Commission and the project partner companies for your commitment to the Vogtle project. The commercial operation of Vogtle Unit 3 marked a significant achievement for the U.S. nuclear energy industry and a milestone in advancing global clean and reliable energy solutions. We're thrilled to witness the successful deployment of this Westinghouse AP1000 reactor, which is helping to shape the energy landscape of the future. Once complete, the addition of Vogtle 3 and 4 will bring more than 2,200 megawatts of carbon-free energy to the grid at a time when we're seeing an increased demand for clean energy generation. As pressure on the grid increases from future energy demand, the 4 Vogtle units together will produce enough always-on carbon-free electricity to power 1 million Georgia homes and businesses. I'm impressed with how Georgia has prepared itself to meet growing demand while holding down costs. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, electricity prices in Georgia are 10% below the national average and are lower than in neighboring states like Florida and Alabama. The investments made to bring on new capacity from Vogtle is the type of forward-looking investment that has allowed Georgia to grow its economy so smartly in recent years. The availability of affordable, abundant, clean electricity is one of the reasons world-class companies like Hyundai, Kia, and others have selected Georgia for major job-creating investments. Nuclear carbon-free energy is and will continue to be the backbone of a clean energy future. Our economy will be stronger in the face of global energy supply disruptions and price fluctuations. Our local communities will benefit from large numbers of long-term, well-paying jobs and will receive essential revenue to support schools, libraries, and first responders. And in Georgia, Vogtle 3 and 4 has already provided over 8,000 construction jobs, making it one of the largest job-producing construction projects in the state. Through Plant Vogtle, Georgia is demonstrating American leadership in nuclear energy, which will serve as a catalyst for our allies around the world who are committing to nuclear power. As you may have seen over the weekend, 22 countries, including the U.S., announced a pledge to triple nuclear capacity by 2050. Nations realize that they're more secure with nuclear energy in their energy portfolio, and that the country they choose as their energy partner really matters. The world is safer when the U.S. is the standard bearer and partner of choice in civil nuclear commerce, and the Vogtle project is helping to ensure long-term U.S. leadership in nuclear energy. I realize the challenges associated with a project of this size and complexity, but I commend the leadership across the state in ensuring the completion of Vogtle 3 and 4. I want to thank the Public Service Commission for the vital role you play in Plant Vogtle's success. It's taken perseverance and a long-term commitment to get where we are today. And this is certainly not lost in the industry. We're all taking the lessons learned here in Georgia from building the first U.S. nuclear plant in 30 years and ensuring they're applied to the next generation of nuclear technology around the country. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks for coming down today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Where's your home?
I live in Maryland now. Well worth the trip.
We appreciate you being here.
No, thank you very much.
Stay and spend some money while you're here.
I was thinking about buying a cash 5 that's 29849.
I like it.
It's the docket number.
Docket number.
Yeah.
Gary Martin. Morning.
Morning. How y'all doing today? My name is Gary Martin. I'm a master's student at the University of Georgia. And 2 years ago, when I started my master's program, the extent I knew about energy was that it could power my car. That's all I really knew. And so my first day in the office, there was an old Southern gentleman sitting in the corner, and he kept telling us, hey, you should take my energy class. And so we signed up, and for the past 2 years, Dr. David Gaddy has filled us in on all the information he has about energy. So one of the big factors that Dr. Gaddy always talks about is just look at the facts. Move everything aside, look at the facts of the situation. When you look at all of the facts, nuclear energy is the obvious way forward. It just makes sense, especially when you look at things like capacity factor. Nuclear energy with a capacity factor of 94 to 95% very much outweighs the 54 to 55% that natural gas and coal can provide. And beyond this, the U.S. is in the process of moving towards being decarbonized. And so when this happens, in this carbon-free future that we're working towards, we're going to need a kind of energy that can fill in and replace the base load that coal uses right now. Nuclear energy is this replacement that at this time, renewable energy doesn't have the energy to do, the availability to do. And so, especially when you look moving on at things like national security, being able to be energy independent and having reliable energy moving forwards is going to be critical. And Plant Vogtle is a great first step. And I just urge Georgia and the rest of the country to keep going in this direction. And that's all I have for y'all today.
Well, thank you for being here. Where's your home?
Gwinnett County.
Very good.
You followed your notes very well.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next, Sam Kalmbacher.
Pronounced it right. Very good.
Oh, wow.
Good morning, Commissioner.
Thanks for being legible there.
My name is Sam Kalmbacher. I'm a master's student in international policy at the University of Georgia with the Center for International Trade and Security. I offer my gratitude to the Public Service Commission to give me the opportunity to speak on behalf of Georgia's leadership in the nuclear energy field today. Plant Vogtle is the first nuclear reactor to be built in the United States in over 30 years and is one of the most impressive feats of engineering, science, and policy in decades. Georgia Power and the Public Service Commission's foresight to provide reliable, affordable, safe, and clean baseload electricity to millions of Georgians is something to be applauded. Its longevity is something that will continue to benefit even my grandchildren. Plant Vogtle's significance in energy can be felt throughout the nation. At a time when we are decarbonizing and amidst increased global competition for resources, we have guaranteed our place as a leader in clean energy with units 3 and 4 at Plant Vogtle. We've decreased our reliance on other nations for energy resources and placed renewed enthusiasm for a technology that will help the United States move forward into an uncertain century. As a member of the next generation of leaders and doers, I'm optimistic that nuclear energy will have a place in our development and our security. It is my hope that other states around the country follow Georgia's lead in creating sensible nuclear policies such as you have. There is an extreme potential in nuclear energy, as we have signified here in Georgia and intend to utilize. We must explore further opportunities to gain all we can from such an incredible technology. Nuclear waste, an item that is easy to get hung up on, can be reprocessed to create our own recyclable fuel source for other nuclear reactors or for use in medicine. Developing this supply chain will not only develop our economy and create jobs, it will decrease our reliance on countries like Russia, who currently exports around 60% of the world's supply of enriched uranium. Policies that explore this potential will even further solidify our leadership in clean, reliable energy while also providing purpose to spent nuclear fuel other than storage. Pioneering Vogtle has given us the tools to be truly independent. In an increasingly competitive market, nuclear may struggle to find its footing. However, nuclear energy has an important place in all of our futures. But you never forget your first. So this concludes my remarks, and I once again thank the Public Service Commission for having me here today to speak about nuclear energy. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
You're a student of Dr. Gaddy's as well?
Yes, sir, I am.
I think I read where he's in Washington testifying this week. Is that right?
Yes, sir. He's testifying in Congress. I forgot about that.
Wow. Next, Sydney Brashears. Good morning.
Good morning. I am the third and final student of the University of Georgia, Master of International Policy, also studying under David Gaddy. So good morning, everyone. My name is Sydney Brashears, and that is my current program. I'm a second-year graduate student studying international policy. Most of my courses have thus far focused on energy security in addition to non-proliferation. So I was really excited to come up here today and speak to you all about nuclear energy as a component of national security. So to kind of get us started, I'll be talking about nuclear security as a component of reaching US climate goals. So to quote some statistics that I'm sure many of us are aware of now, the US has goals of reaching carbon pollution-free electricity by 2035 and a net zero emissions economy by 2050. I believe that nuclear energy is the way forward if we hope to achieve these goals. Now, I will speak a little bit about renewable energy. Now, these sources of energy are great in expanding infrastructure.
Just a little bit closer. There
yes, sorry. And expanding infrastructure for renewable is great. However, what we do know about these sources of energy is that they are intermittent. So to quote a very common phrase, that they're great until the wind stops blowing and the sun stops shining. And so what we do know is that we have a baseline energy demand that we need to meet regardless of whether or not the wind is blowing and the sun is shining. And so with that, we have been able to somewhat overcome the issue of intermittency with advances in lithium-ion battery technology, but these advancements only go so far. And an over-reliance on lithium-ion batteries introduces both a cost issue and a security issue to US supply chains. And so when we talk about the supply chains, we're looking at the fact that China currently is in charge of roughly 14% of the world's lithium production. And in addition to that, they're in charge of approximately 75% of global lithium-ion battery manufacturing, which is a scary statistic if we're talking about increasing our dependence on these batteries for energy storage. Now, I believe that to provide our baseload energy needs, nuclear is a better solution. Moving forward, we know that advanced designs like advanced reactors, Generation 4 reactors, are safer than ever before. They have integrated safety features, and there are new structural designs for fuel types that make them resistant to proliferation concerns. Looking at that would be primarily TRISO fuel, for example. We also know that Centrus Energies has begun production for high assay, low enriched uranium, which is the type of fuel that we would be using for advanced reactors moving forward. So we do have a domestic supply of this energy resource and would decrease our reliance on countries like Russia, for example. So with that, I would just like to say that if the US is hoping to essentially achieve our climate goals moving forward in a way that is both energy secure and energy reliable, it would behoove us to introduce further nuclear facilities to meet these goals. That would conclude my remarks. Thank you.
Yeah, great job. I just have a question for
Sure.
you. The geopolitical alliances, I don't know if Dr. Gaddy's talked about this, that Russia and China trade for, and locking countries into an alliance. Is that
Right.
something that y'all have talked about? Is that part of the energy security that the U.S. needs to be looking at, in your opinion?
Absolutely. That's a wonderful question. So within our program, we have an energy statecraft course, and it's an amazing course. They allow us to essentially divide our class into different command regions. And so I lucked out and was on the UCOM command region. So I spent an entire semester looking at energy in Europe specifically. My final presentation was actually on Russia. I lovingly dubbed it Russia in 10 minutes, which is really hard to cover when you're talking about energy. But it's definitely something that we look at. We look at the fact that these countries are engaging in terms of nuclear, very long-term relationships with these countries. Not only if they're providing the upstart and essentially like the turnkey properties, like they may be participating in the actual building of the facilities, running of the facility, and if they're not doing either of those two, they may be supplying fuel for it. So any way you look at it, they're engaging in very long-term relationships with these countries where they're setting up facilities. So awesome question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very impressive. I say go dogs.
Go dogs. Yeah.
Seriously, I'm a SPIA grad before it was called SPIA. I'm not afraid I didn't pay attention as much as y'all did. Impressive. Mr. Robert Searfoss.
I'm Robert Searfoss, an elderly Georgia Power customer, still forced to give my modest retirement money and surcharges for nothing to Georgia Power. Georgia Power's theft and use of elderly and school tax money to prop up their excessive profits makes them a poster child case for phasing out for-profit monopoly utilities. Is there anyone in Georgia, any commissioner up here, or any person in this room here today that thinks diverting school taxes to finance a private ventures is a good idea? Monopoly utility Georgia Power thinks it's a good idea. They must like it because Georgia Power has repeatedly fought against legislation that would have exempted schools from their extraordinary surcharges. And today, December the 5th, Georgia Power takes school money as they are years late again on ending the surcharges. They're still taking money today. We have here a perfect example of corporate wrongdoing, a perfect example that monopoly corporations are not people. A healthy person thinks redirecting their school taxes to finance Georgia Power is a wrong and bad idea. Georgia Power is not a person, but it is a sick monopoly. For years now, Monopoly Georgia Power has been getting carte blanche here at the regulatory PSC. One evidence is the don't give a damn posture of the commission in this prudency review. In the face of billions of misspent dollars at the Vogtle venture, no real forensic review on the mistakes and delays and overruns is at hand. In this cut down, abbreviated prudency hearing, billions of misspent dollars and billions in costly mistakes are about to be put on the captive customers and not on those who made the blunders. It will be a shame. It will be wrong. The continuing lack of meaningful regulatory pushback shows it is time to phase out the for-profit monopoly utility model. It shows that monopoly utilities capture the regulators. This model metastasizes. This model rots to the point that it gets away with taking elderly and school tax money for its own profit. The Georgia Vogtle venture is a bellwether thing. It shows that on-planet atomic electric plants just cost too much, and Vogtle is the last. Also, the Vogtle venture is likely the beginning of the end of for-profit monopoly utilities. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any questions?
Mr. Searfoss.
Yes.
You've been a regular here and we appreciate that very much. Have you looked into the difference of a regulated monopoly versus a deregulated monopoly that exists in the country?
Well, I think the short answer on that is here in Georgia and here in the areas where Georgia Power is the electric monopoly, I don't really have a choice to buy my power from somebody else.
That wasn't my question.
Oh.
Have you looked into the cost of the kilowatt in a deregulated market versus a regulated market? We are in a regulated market here in Georgia. There are utilities in this nation that elected to deregulate through the legislative process. So have you compared the price of your concern with that kilowatt?
Well, I'm not
If you
an
haven't,
expert.
I suggest you do that.
Pardon me, okay. I'll do that, but in the meantime, the problem that I have is that I don't have a choice to buy my power from anybody else, regulated or unregulated. When I buy power, I have to buy it from Georgia Power. And you guys here, pardon me, you, the commissioners, here are the ones that set the tariffs and the rates for that. And my impression is that by putting even 10 cents of the cost of the mistakes at Vogtle into the rate base means that I'm paying for their mistake and paying a profit on their mistake. And this whole thing about prudency, it's not whether nuclear is a great idea or not, or whether we should do coal or power dams or geothermal or whatever. It's not about that. It's about who is paying for the tremendous, astonishing, staggering costs of this plant, of these two plants that they built. One of them is still under construction. They're still trying to fix it, even today when you're having the final hearings on the thing. To me, it's absolutely astonishing that I'm still paying surcharges with no compensation for nothing.
Thank you, Mr. Searfoss.
Yeah.
You answered my question.
Yeah, I really thank you for the question. I'm not an expert in energy policy and everything. I just know one thing. I am an expert in this. I know that I've been paying for years from my modest retirement money to Georgia Power, and I get nothing for my money except upgoing electric rates. And it's wrong. It's wrong. And it's the commission's job to not let that happen. You shouldn't let 1 cent of mistaken construction, the mistakes, the wiring that went wrong, the foundation that was poured wrong, that giant thing that fell off the train car into the mud.
Thank you,
the
Mr. Searfoss.
billions in costs of mistakes. Not 1 cent of mistaken money should be in the rate base. Not 1 cent of it.
Thank you, sir. Miss Annie Howard Stevens.
It's your job to keep mistakes out of the rate base.
Miss Annie Stevens. There you are. Good morning, Miss Stevens.
Good morning.
How are you?
It is well. My name is Ann and Laura Howard Stevens. Grew up in Shell Bluff. And my beginning with Georgia Power is that our land, the Julius Howard estate, that when we were not for or against, nor did we know anything about Georgia Power and then the reactors that was to be built. But when Mr. Steve Rue told me after we had got the taxes paid, we saw the land, we wanted it, we went through the court system and got it. And that's how I got involved in it, because he wanted the land and I had to go to court and all of that. But then what topped it off, when I was invited to the environmental meeting down in Augusta, Georgia, with Reverend Charles Utley and Reverend Willie Tumlin to come to the meeting before the Nuclear Regulatory Commissioners. Well, I didn't know anything about the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. But when this young lady got up and said about cancer in those areas that where these nuclear power plants are, a still small voice spoke to me and quote, "Speak now or forever hold your peace," end quote. The fear of the white man was great, but the fear of that still small voice was greater. And I've been paying the price and suffering from that ever since. And as I hear others talk about what is going on with these plants now, it let me know that something is not right in the process of it. And as one Women's Action have said, nuclear weapons, nuclear waste, and nuclear power don't demonstrate, don't discriminate. What will affect one will affect us all. And the price of going up on these high electric bills and all of that. What's the purpose of really laying heavy burdens on the parishioners who have to pay it? When I remember we didn't have lights, gas, nor telephone. And God provided us light, food, and everything we needed. So if it's not right with the people who are here and they find fault in it, then what right is it with the Lord, Jesus Christ, the one that created the heaven and the earth with everything that we needed before nuclear weapons and nuclear power got here? Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, Pam Woodley. Morning, Miss Woodley.
Hi. I guess I thought this hearing wasn't about whether nuclear power is good or bad. I thought it was, Vogtle's here, and it's more about who's going to pay for the cost overruns. I am a layperson in energy. I don't know if nuclear power is good or bad. I really don't. I was an actuary with Aetna, set premiums for insurance, health insurance, and I screwed up sometimes, and we lost a lot of money on a given group. And I didn't get my bonus that year. We couldn't pass it on to our competitors, Cigna, United, Blue Cross, because we had a ton of competition. We had some big projects that went way over budget and were mismanaged. And again, we couldn't charge 75% of that to our customers because we had really stiff competition. Georgia Power has no competition. Instead, we have you all. And it just doesn't seem like it's operating like a capitalist free market to me. And I guess that's my main point. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Kevin Doyle.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Thank you for allowing me to speak here today. I'm Kevin Doyle, Vice President of State Affairs for Consumer Energy Alliance. Hope you all had a great Thanksgiving and thanks for the jobs that you all do here in the state of Georgia. Consumer Energy Alliance is a leading voice for sensible energy and environmental policies for consumers, bringing together families, farmers, small businesses, distributors, producers, and manufacturers to support America's environmentally sustainable energy future. With members nationwide, CEA is committed to leading the nation's dialogue around energy, the environment, and energy's critical role in the economy, and how it supports the vital supply chains for families and businesses that depend on them. We thank you for scheduling this meeting today on an important topic that's impacting everyone in Georgia and across America. Reliability is an important aspect for Americans and Georgians as they think about energy. Nuclear energy has been and should continue to be a huge component of all that equation. Not only does nuclear energy provide additional source of energy for our country, but it is also environmentally friendly and reduces reliance on energy from foreign sources. It is also critical that we have the resources of permanent, always-on power to ensure that we have reliable energy when the sun is not shining or the wind is not blowing. Nuclear and natural gas are our only viable options for permanent power. Nuclear energy facilities such as Plant Vogtle can provide permanent electricity for decades, which helps with providing dependable energy for all homeowners and businesses. It is exciting times to the future of nuclear energy. Investing now will also help sustain and develop nuclear energy innovations for tomorrow, including the next round of nuclear energy in the form of small modular reactor options. Supporting nuclear energy development here in Georgia provides stability over the long term, the ability to underpin renewable energy projects with always-on power, and to secure the reliability it affords. American leadership has already shown that we can meet or exceed emission reduction goals while producing more energy when we are allowed to do so without restrictive policies from Washington. America is already leading the world in both energy development and environmental stewardships. Let us unleash more opportunities to build on the progress we have already demonstrated here in Georgia and across America. Thank you again for allowing me to be here today, and thank you for what you do. Appreciate it.
Stephen Winger. Morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. But if you actually want to hear what the people you represent have to say, I suggest holding the hearings in the evening when working people who will be most impacted can be present. Thank you. Looking into your faces in this room yesterday morning, I could see that each of you sincerely believes that nuclear power is a wise investment. I respectfully disagree. If nuclear power was a wise investment, companies like Georgia Power would have no difficulty getting an insurance policy to cover it, instead of relying on taxpayers like me to cover a potentially catastrophic accident. Nor would taxpayers have to subsidize the medical bills of thousands of uranium miners who suffer from radiation sickness, or pay the unknown costs of safeguarding Georgia Power's deadly waste for thousands of years. And if expanding Plant Vogtle was a wise investment, Georgia Power would have surely invested its own money instead of burdening ratepayers like me with billions of dollars in construction costs. No, nuclear power is not a wise investment, but it is an extremely profitable one for a simple reason. Public subsidies for the nuclear industry at every step of the way, while private corporations pocket the proceeds. If the money invested in Vogtle 3 and 4 had been invested instead in renewables like solar and wind and conservation, it would have yielded far more jobs, cheaper, cleaner energy, and a much, much larger and faster reduction in carbon emissions, but far less profit for Georgia Power. But the damage is now done, so you and I will have to agree to disagree and move on to the next issue, whether the cost overruns of this grossly imprudent project can be considered prudent. So let me ask you, do you sincerely believe it is fair and just for ordinary people already struggling to pay their utility bills to pay for the mistakes and misfortunes of a multi-billion-dollar private corporation? Is it morally acceptable that single mothers, minimum wage workers, people on welfare and unemployment, underfunded public schools, small business owners, and retired people like me should accept Georgia Power's fourth rate hike in less than a year so that wealthy stockholders can enjoy their record-breaking dividends? You sincerely believe that ratepayers who have not yet finished paying for the most expensive construction project in Georgia history through an extra fee on their monthly bills, and who will now begin paying even more for the privilege of using the most expensive form of electricity ever invented, should now also shoulder a 26% higher rate to pay for the construction errors and cost overruns of a company that has pocketed $17 billion in profit in the process of making those errors and overruns. It's becoming embarrassingly clear why the company that supplies my home's electricity is not called Georgia Electricity. This is the company that produces electricity only as a sideline. Its real business is power. The power to take what it wants from the poor and powerless to line the pockets of its stockholders and executives. At the same time, it's becoming less and less clear why you yourselves are called a public service commission. I'm sorry to break this to you, but aiding and abetting the powerful in their quest for unlimited profit is not a public service. But just as every football team needs its squad of cheerleaders, even a team without an opponent, no corporate monopoly is complete without its own squad of public servants to give the official rubber stamp of approval to any scheme it comes up with to boost its profits. Regardless of how sincerely you believe in what you do, the legitimacy you confer on this latest scheme is so transparently phony that by rights, Georgia Power should be paying your salaries instead of taxpayers like me. But I'm forgetting that getting others to pay its business expenses is one of this company's specialties. So as a ratepayer, a voter, and a taxpayer, I ask you not to act on your own convictions, however sincere, but to rule instead on behalf of the powerless, who have no defense against the powerful except the hope and prayer that their public servants on the Public Service Commission will choose to act on behalf of the public they were elected to serve. I am rooting for you. Go team. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We had one final person sign up, Eric Menez. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. I missed part of this meeting. I apologize. And I'm not the final closer that this issue deserves. I haven't prepared any remarks, but I did learn a lot from the previous speakers, and I echo their sentiments. My family and I have lived in Georgia for more than 30 years here in Atlanta and have purchased our electricity from Georgia Power. I cannot do more than express my own feelings and those of the people in my family and our neighbors as echoing what you've just heard from the previous speakers. We feel powerless, ironically, in the face of Georgia Power. I have solar panels on my roof in an attempt to liberate myself from Georgia Power. The rules Georgia Power has created, as in multiple other issues, limit what I can do. If I produce more than 10 kilowatt hours, and I'm not an electrician, so I may get this wrong, if any residence produces enough electricity really for their needs, that's too much, and we're no longer allowed to do that. the cap on how much a residence can produce is low in Georgia. The benefits of solar power are not fully gained by people who invest in it here because of the rates that Georgia Power has for selling electricity and purchasing electricity from a residence. We're totally disappointed in it. And I think the underlying flaw is the governance. I'm sorry, not you guys personally, but the governance structure. My understanding is right now, some of you are serving unelected because the elections in 2022 were canceled. This gets at an even deeper issue about democracy in America. Do our votes count? If our votes counted, we would wait until there was another election to make up for the one that was canceled due to the violations of Georgia's election laws, and have a representative board make this decision. I see no reason why it should be made now. I mean, the however many $1 billion that Georgia Power has misspent isn't going to grow, substantially, significantly if we wait until there is a full election and we have the commission as mandated by law of elected representatives making that decision. I hope that if you do not heed this and you go ahead and vote now, that case goes to court and costs Georgia Power a lot in legal fees and results in the decision being canceled. Please do right by the people. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That was the last person signed up on the sheet, but before we move on, was there anyone else that wanted to provide any public comments? Yes, ma'am.
Good morning again to Commissioner Shaw, the rest of the Public Service Commission. My name is Kim Scott, Executive Director for Georgia One Women's Actions for New Directions. But I'm also a chemical engineering degree graduate of Vanderbilt University, SEC, go SEC. So to the young people that spoke, I chose to use my engineering degree for environmental, social justice, and civic engagement, and to make a wrong right in policy, and I hope that you would do the same. Pro-nuclear energy sentiment is growing, especially as countries weigh in on the effects of oil supply due to the war in Ukraine, for example. Nuclear energy is also being touted as a renewable energy source, but we know that's not accurate because it's not carbon free. As of 2011, about 15% of the world's electricity is generated by nuclear power plants. The United States has more than 100 reactors, although it creates most of its electricity from fossil fuels and hydroelectric energy. As one of the other young ladies mentioned, that nations such as Russia, France, create almost all of their electricity from nuclear power plants. So that's why it's more of an emergency and national security threat than the US. The world's reliance on nuclear energy has increased this farce and exacerbated by climate change. Undeserved Black and Brown communities in the US, Georgia, and globally are suffering. So what are we saying? Even in Georgia, where we have the nuclear power plant Vogtle in Burke County, a local social epidemiologist deemed these areas cancer threats, cancer hotspots. He's also a member of the Augusta State University. So when we think about the impacts of what nuclear has done from a public health inequity, we can't turn a blind eye. We can't turn a blind eye to the fact that a lot of the Brown and Black communities in this area and the customers in Georgia have been impacted and are severely energy burdened. This, if you approve this vote, will be the fourth rate increase in 1 year for our great state of Georgia. We are asking you to reconsider this request from Georgia Power and really do the right thing. Georgians are suffering, not only from a public health and equity standpoint, but also from an energy justice standpoint. And we ask that you really take that into consideration and help us to be able to fight this environmental, social justice, injustice that is happening in our great state of Georgia. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Anyone else? Thanks to each.
I guess my question is, if Plant Vogtle is so great for national security and helping us stand up to Russia and China and everything, why are Georgians paying for all of it? It seems like it should be some kind of federal thing. So that's my question. Again, it comes down to who's paying for all this?
Thank you, ma'am. All right. As is commission rule, we'll take a 10-minute break before we move on to the, we'll start with the next on the witness list in the case. So we'll take a 10-minute break and come back at 10:53. All right, we're going to call the hearing back to order. We're going to go ahead and call the hearing back to order. It's docket number 29849. Georgia Power Company's application to adjust rates to include reasonable and prudent plant Vogtle units 3 and 4 costs. We've had the appearance list. We've gone through public witnesses. Next in the order is where we left off yesterday with the next witness panel I'll call up is Concerned Ratepayers of Georgia. Morning, Mr. Prevett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to call Patty Durand to the stand. And also, Mr. Scherer will swear her in. Could I get some space on the table?
I need to sit there. Mr. Henry, please raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is truthful and accurate to the best of your knowledge?
I do.
May I please ask you to state your full name and address for the record?
Patty Durand, 4010 Rygate Court, Conyers, Georgia.
And on whose behalf are you testifying today?
Concerned Ratepayers of Georgia.
On October 26th of this year, did you pre-file or cause to be pre-filed 29 pages of direct testimony in question and answer format?
Yes.
Did you also file an exhibit on December 1st marked PD CRG number 1 titled Patty Durand EIA chart?
Yes.
Do you have any changes or corrections that you need to make to your pre-filed direct testimony or the exhibit at this
No,
time?
I do not.
If I were to ask you the same questions today under oath, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Mr. Chairman, I'd ask at this time that Ms. Durand's public disclosure testimony and her exhibit be copied into the record as if given here today, subject to cross.
Yes,
Mr. Thomas?
Mr. Chair, I'm going to object to the exhibit being entered into the record. The PSO paragraph C requires any demonstrative handouts intended to be used during summations to be pre-filed at least 5 days in advance of the hearing. And the demonstrative exhibit she intends to use during her testimony today is not on the filing log, and I've confirmed with the executive secretary that it is not filed.
Which exhibits are you referring? Are you referring to the exhibits that you had yesterday?
No, there was an exhibit in Mr. Prinovitz's email that was marked as a demonstrative exhibit for Ms. Durand, but it was never filed with the commission.
Yeah, it was this particular exhibit here.
When did you send that, Mr. Prevett?
When did I send it?
Friday, December 1st.
Friday.
Right, it was sent, but it was not filed in compliance with the PSO. Mr. Prinovitz intervenes on a regular basis. He uses the filing system. He filed Ms. Durand's testimony, and he should be aware that sending an email is not the same thing as filing. Filing is required by the PSO for several important reasons. It's important for transparency, so the public knows what's going on. And it's important so that everyone sees. His email only included 20 people, and it didn't even include advisory staff.
I do have a copy of the PSO, the procedure and scheduling order with regards to witness testimonies, and it does say that that it must be pre-filed at least 5 days prior to the hearing if it was not part of the pre-filed testimony. So even if it had been filed properly, we still were not within the 5 days. So we'll not allow those exhibits, but we did enter into the record, I believe, your exhibits 1, 2, 3, and 4 from yesterday.
Yeah, that was different though. My
Yeah.
exhibits were basically for cross. This particular exhibit was part of.
It's part of it. Use that microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Basically, my exhibits were just for the cross-examination. This particular exhibit was part of Mr. Rand's testimony, so we apologize if we didn't get it on time, but
Well, I'm sure it was not intentional, and I apologize that it doesn't meet the requirements of the procedure and scheduling.
I understand.
Mr. Rand, do you have a summary that you have prepared of your testimony?
Yes, I have.
Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'd like to ask Mr. Rand to read her summary.
Go ahead, Mr. Rand.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
The stipulated agreement before you is unseemly, inappropriate, and harmful for the people of Georgia and should be rejected. For 14 years, this commission has declined to review or disallow Vogtle's cost overruns, repeatedly stating that you would determine what was reasonable and prudent when the project was completed. This claim was most recently made on July 27th during VCM 28 when Commissioner McDonald said it, and that this commission would review all expenses now. And here we are, literally deciding the largest rate case in Georgia history with a rocket docket of mere hours and no real prudency review. Note that the Georgia Public Service Commission, as with all state commissions, is structured to be a neutral party in an adversarial two-party system, much like a court of law. While stipulated agreements may not be illegal, they should be, especially the secretive way that Georgia Power conducts them. Stipulated agreements should involve all interested parties, otherwise it's a backroom deal. And this case was even worse. Not only were interveners hand-selected by Georgia Power, but for the first time ever, this stipulated agreement was reached prior to any hearings or any testimony from interveners or members of the public. This is a gross distortion of the public process. Yesterday, Mr. Abramovitz claimed that anybody could attend the hearing, but I guess we would have needed a Jedi mind meld to know when they were. And I had lunch with Liz Coyle, one of the signers of the stipulated agreement, on August 2nd. The stipulated agreement was published August 30th. Those discussions were happening then, and Liz Coyle and I discussed Plant Vogtle and this rate increase at length, yet she never mentioned the stipulated agreement discussions that she was in because she knew they were secretive too. So Mr. Abramovitz was either joking or gaslighting by his statements yesterday. Every utility's goal is to increase their rate base, which I've heard very little of today and yesterday. In fact, all the public speakers speaking in support of nuclear generally never mentioned the rate base. I guess they didn't know about it. But the rate base is the total value of a utility's assets. The larger the rate base, the more profits they earn. That is literally their single goal. If this commission approves the stipulated agreement, Georgia Power's rate base will expand an astonishing 47%, an enormous increase in their profitability of nearly $1 billion a year, forever. And yet Georgia Power's generation expands only 7.5%. Only a distorted regulatory relationship favoring a monopoly utility over ratepayer interests would allow such a disparate amount of rate base increase for a tiny bit of generation. $7.562 billion is the largest rate increase in Georgia history, in fact, in U.S. history for any state commission. And that enormous price tag does not include $3.5 billion in financing, on which Georgia Power also makes a profit. Adding those together, we reach $11.1 billion going to Georgia's rate base. For that, we get 1,000 megawatts of energy. That equals $10,784 per kilowatt of installed capacity. That's insanity. The document that I know the commission has because Sally Tanner said you had it, and I know Georgia Power has it because she said you had it, so we can play games about whether this document should be entered into the record, shows what EIA says installed capacity costs for wind, solar, and gas. Solar is only $1,500 per kilowatt of installed capacity. Wind is only $1,400 per kilowatt of installed capacity, and gas is $920 per kilowatt of installed capacity. Are you guys going to allow this to be entered into the record?
I've already ruled on that.
All right. Meanwhile, Vogtle is $10,000 per $784 per kilowatt of installed capacity. My hats are off. My hat is off to Georgia Power. Good job, gentlemen and lady, for your ability to convince well-meaning people into signing an agreement that Georgia Power customers should pay 10 times the installed capacity for nuclear and then come down here and speak positively about it. That's an impressive hat trick. Customers could have paid so much less, but that wouldn't have been as profitable for you. So here we sit. If my hands are shaking and my voice is shaking today, it's not because I'm nervous. It's because I'm so angry at the situation that we're here today discussing. The stipulated agreement forces Georgia Power customers to pay 10 times more for installed capacity, but we are to believe that somehow this saves money because Georgia Power doesn't get all of the cost overruns. That's nonsense. Georgia Power succeeds in averting an embarrassing and shocking public review of their incompetence in constructing and managing Plant Vogtle with this stipulated agreement. Yesterday, Mr. Abramovich said that Georgia Power's expenditures for Plant Vogtle were all reasonable and prudent, and Georgia Power consultants said so as well. But it's not true, is it? Construction failures from the very beginning were, well, besides the prostitution rings and on-site drug use, which is documented, I'm not making that up. In 2012, the first rebar was installed incorrectly and had to be redone. In 2013, the first concrete pour resulted in a stop work order and Nuclear Regulatory Commission findings of significant breakdown in quality assurance. The modular parts didn't work and had to be set up on factories on site and reworked. Vogtle never achieved an integrated project schedule and averaged 1 day of delay for every day of construction. I'm sure that's why the IBEW gentlemen loved this work. They made a ton of money for many, many years beyond when they should have. This rework is why the project is 7 years late. Now we talk about Westinghouse bankruptcy and COVID. COVID expenses were $250 million. Do you know how much that is of $35 billion? Not even 1%. COVID had nothing to do with why this project is so far over budget. And neither did the Westinghouse bankruptcy, because what happened after they went bankrupt? Well, the cost overruns accelerated. The delays accelerated. In 2021, while using pressurized air to check for leaks in welds, the IBEW craft workmen overpressurized and ruined the steel floor in the spent fuel pool and had to replace the whole fuel pool. 600 cables were installed incorrectly and had to be rewired. Independent monitors have documented extensive site and executive management failures. Georgia Power filed materially inaccurate schedules and budgets for at least 10 years of the project. What's another word for material inaccurate? It's lying. Georgia Power's approach to project planning was to develop an unachievable plan, fail relatively quickly, and repeat the process to develop a new and still unachievable plan. And those aren't my words. That's independent construction monitor Don Grace's words, or maybe it was Steve Recker's words. The documentation on file is so extensive, it's head spinning and nauseating on the corruption and incompetencies of this project. DCM 22, Don Grace documented a component failure rate of 80%. Is that prudent and reasonable? Supporters of this agreement claim wins for 2 program expansions that assist Georgia Power customers with utility bill affordability. Nothing that we heard anything from our student supporters or the nuclear energy industry speaker. Programs assisting customers with bill affordability should not be a card played by Georgia Power under any circumstances, never mind one that allows them to post $17 billion in profits while avoiding prudency review for billions of dollars in cost overruns. The income qualified senior discount program is not even paid by Georgia Power. It's paid by us, customers. Why are they calling the shots on that program? That's your job. Georgia Power is one of the richest utilities in the nation. Their return on equity is far higher than industry norms. They should not be allowed to decide how many senior Georgians living 200% below the federal poverty line may be on the program. All seniors 200% below the poverty line should be in this program, not whatever number Georgia Power deems acceptable. That's shameful. I don't like to think of any senior that poor having their lights disconnected. and none of you should either. Same with the demand side management program. When? That's some of the interveners who signed, supported, and is happy about. Demand side management programs save customers significant money. That is another card the utility should not be playing in this billion-dollar poker game. This commission should require any program that saves customers money to be implemented with zero input from the monopoly utility, earning a guaranteed rate of return on captive customers who have no choice in who their utility is. Ensuring customers have the lowest possible bills while Georgia Power retains financial integrity is literally the job of this commission. But where is that balance? Georgia's electricity bills rank in the top 10 highest in the country, while Georgia Power profits range between 14% and 20% every year. That's insanity. There's no balance here. During the troubled Vogtle construction years, Georgia Power enjoyed increasingly high profitability, totaling nearly $17 billion between 2009 and 2022 when this project was constructed. In fact, the more the project was delayed and over budget, the more profits Georgia Power received. Georgia Power should be required to use their huge profits to pay for Vogtle cost overruns instead of allowing Georgia Power to pass these billions of dollars on to its captive customers. It's disappointing to me that interveners even participate in this process because it gives Georgia Power cover to say, if these nonprofits agree, then it must be good for customers, which is exactly what they said yesterday. But good intentions and good missions from these nonprofits do not always produce good results, and in this case, it didn't. This commission has not conducted a single customer impact study on what adding $11.1 billion will do to vulnerable families struggling to pay Georgia utility bills. Yet understanding rate impacts is literally the job of a state regulatory commission. There is no more important role. Otherwise, this commission cannot responsibly meet state law to set just and reasonable rates. Yet this rate proceeding for Plant Vogtle, the largest in state history and far from normal, has had no customer impact study ordered or even discussed. Why do you think Georgia Power, in a rare rebuttal to intervener testimony, chose this part of my filing to dispute? Is it because they don't want to know and don't want you to know how much Jordan's already high energy burden is going to grow? That adding $11 billion to rates would do? We know from 2022's disconnection report that 240,000 Georgia households are disconnected. And when I say disconnected, I don't mean they sit in the light in the dark with candles. They lose their food, their freezer rots, they lose their cell phones, their laptops. If they're parents, they might lose custody of their children because DFACS will not allow parents to keep their children in a home without electricity. It leads to destabilization of families. And you know what? Those people aren't here today because they're working. How many more households will be pushed into instability when next summer rates go up? We don't know, and thus vulnerable families will not receive assistance that this commission could be giving them. This commission rarely, if ever, speaks about the pain expressed by public witnesses or impacts of rate increases or disconnection on customers. Sadly, the opposite is even true. When a public witness recently asked how the commission thought the residents of Burke County would be able to afford electricity rate increases from Vogtle, Commissioner McDonald asserted that the power produced by Units 3 will be among the cheapest and cleanest in the state, and compared Vogtle to buying a new car with better mileage. You're going to be saving on fuel costs, but you still have to pay for the car, he said. That makes no sense. Such statements from Commissioner McDonald indicates he doesn't understand the difference between fixed and variable costs. Whatever small amount of fuel savings there is, if any, will not be lower than the enormous rate increases customers are required to pay for constructing Plant Vogtle. There's no evidence that asserts any savings to customers. Note that Georgia Power doesn't make such statements. Georgia Power's PR machine would love to be trumpeting cost savings throughout the state, but they are silent because it's not true. Stop saying it. We know from tariff filings that units 3 and 4 will increase residential rates 26% for the lifespan of these reactors. The last I checked, a 26% increase is not saving money. I'm not saying the bill will go up 26% because the NCCR tariff will stop, but certainly the bill will go up a lot. Most corporations list their value proposition as having high quality equipment, great customer service, a better product than someone else. Georgia Power's parent, Southern Company, in their Q3 presentation to Wall Street, you know what they list their value proposition is? You. That's right, commissioners. You are listed as premier state-regulated utilities supporting shareholder dividends as their value proposition. That's outrageous and is yet another indication that this commission is not protecting the public from monopoly pricing and power.
Mr. Durand, let me interrupt you just a second because the commission rules on a summary of testimony is 15 minutes, but I'm
Okay.
trying to work with you on that. I just
All right.
was wanting to know if you know, can you finish your summary?
Yes.
Briefly?
Yeah,
So,
in less than 5.
Go
probably
ahead.
4. Commissioners, you celebrate that you have a constructive regulatory relationship with Georgia Power, but that is not your job. Your job is to be a check on monopoly power and take the place of the free market that is missing. There could be no clearer definition of regulatory capture than seeing a for-profit corporation like Georgia Power, parent Southern Company, list commissioners as their value proposition. And we see the result. Georgia Power bills are consistently ranked 5th or 6th highest in the nation. Adding $11 billion to the rates will push Georgia Power bills to the highest in the nation. So no, commissioners, the people of Georgia won't be thanking you for Plant Vogtle in 5 years or any other time frame. Customers who are disconnected for sure won't be thanking you. There's no competitive business market in which a for-profit corporation could deliver a project that is $18 billion over budget and 7 years late. It just would not happen. The free market would attain balance through bankruptcy, lawsuits, and jail. So in that regard, it would be better to have no commission than to have one that provides state-sanctioned ratepayer robbery. I remind commissioners that this commission added no cost cap or consumer protections to this project, despite Vogtle units 1 and 2 going far over budget, and despite staff's strong recommendations to do so. And you continued this project despite strong opposition. I'd like to close with the following recommendations: that this commission reject this stipulated agreement and conduct the thorough prudency hearings that you committed to repeatedly and that Georgia Power customers deserve. That this commission expand the qualified low-income senior program to all seniors living 200% below or more the poverty line without regard to Georgia Power's desires and wishes. That's your job. That commissioners expand the demand-side management program to help customers save money. That's your job. That commissioners figure out how to create a reasonable balance between setting just and reasonable rates and the utility's financial viability, because right now there is no such balance. It's all for Georgia Power. That Georgia Power utilized its own massive profits over the past 14 years to pay for its construction mistakes, cost overruns, and delays on Vogtle 4. That you order a customer impact study to gain an understanding of how the largest rate increase in state history impacts customers, and then act on those findings by creating assistance programs for the expansion of the extremely high levels of energy poverty the state already has. Right now, 70% of people disconnected are people of color. There's no provision for energy burden, energy poverty, or bill pay assistance for those communities. Never mind the addition to those communities this rate increase will have. That you clarify for the media and for ratepayers that rates are increasing 26% to pay for Plant Vogtle, or that you provide transparency in what the total bill increases will be, which is much more than the $9 a month that some media outlets have incorrectly calculated, because you do not provide official calculations. So reporters struggle to understand rate impacts. That is information you should be providing, and that most commissions routinely do. and that you stop allowing the crazy level of redactions and trade secrets on filings Georgia Power makes. Georgia Power customers are paying. Customers have no choice in who their provider is. Georgia Power does not have intellectual property they need to protect. Electricity is a commodity. Georgia Power customers have a right to know what they're required to pay for. And these facts are hidden because Georgia Power doesn't want anyone to know things like a 47% rate base expansion with a 7% increase in capacity. That concludes my testimony.
Thank you, Ms. Durand.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Durand is now available for questions from the commission, many of the interveners and from Georgia Power.
Thank you, Mr. Prudency. Commissioners, any questions? All right, we'll move on down the list of the parties for the chance to cross the panel, starting with the Public Service Commission.
No questions, Mr.
No questions. Georgia Association of Manufacturers, they are not here today and did indicate they had no cross. Georgia Interfaith Power and Light and Partnership for Southern Equity.
No questions.
No questions. Georgia Watch also indicated they were not able to be here and they had no cross. Resource Supply Management, not present. Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, no questions. Georgia Power Company,
No questions, Mr.
no
Chair.
questions. Mr. Prudency, do you have any redirect?
Mr. Chairman, there have been no cross-examination asked of the witness, so there's no opportunity for redirect.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Whitson.
Give me a second.
Yeah, commission rule as far as redirected.
Just need to confirm that Mr. Rand's testimony is in the record.
Oh, yes. So Mark,
Okay, so we good?
we're good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
You want to, so I can excuse your witness now?
Oh, yes. Mr. Rand, you're excused.
Thank you, ma'am. We have got one more panel to call up. Georgia Power Company, this is your rebuttal testimony.
Yes, sir.
I want to just say one thing. Commissioner McDonald is the only commissioner that has been here through the entire Vogtle process. So that makes him have sat through more hearings on this project than probably any commissioner in modern history. So I think it's fitting that I pass the gavel on this final panel. Commissioner, if you would, please handle this panel.
Okay, it's your direction, Mr. Chairman. I will do so and recognize Georgia Power to seat your witnesses, please.
Thank you, Commissioner. At this time, I'll call the Georgia Power Company witnesses on rebuttal, Mr. Abramovitz, Mr. Haswell, and Mr. Williams. Gentlemen, I will remind you that you are still under oath, so you may just take your seats when you're ready.
I think these witnesses have already been sworn.
They have.
And they have, and the only thing that I ask of you is to eat that microphone while you're talking to us.
Yes, sir, Commissioner McDonald.
Gentlemen, on November 16th, 2023, did you pre-file or cause to be pre-filed 6 pages of rebuttal testimony in question and answer format?
We did.
Yes. Do you have any corrections to that pre-filed testimony?
No.
If I were to ask you the same questions today under oath, would your answers be the same as in that pre-filed testimony?
Yes.
Commissioner McDonald, the court reporter has been provided a copy of the pre-filed rebuttal testimony, and I now ask that the rebuttal testimony of this panel be copied into the record as if given here today.
So marked.
And with your permission, I will ask Mr. Abramovitz to summarize the pre-filed rebuttal testimony of the company.
Would you please do so at this time? 15 minutes.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Commissioner McDonald and other commissioners. Mr. Haswell, Mr. Williams, and I thank you for the opportunity to be here again. My rebuttal testimony responds to the testimony and recommendations filed by PIA staff and one intervener. In light of the stipulation reached by most of the parties in this proceeding, our rebuttal testimony does not address every issue raised in the PIA staff and intervenor testimony. The fact that we did not specifically respond to a particular position does not, of course, mean that we agree with or support the position. Rather, a detailed response was not necessary, given that all staff witnesses concluded that this commission should approve the stipulation as written. Like PIA staff, the company recommends that the commission approve the broad-based and constructive stipulation reached between Georgia Power, PIA staff, and multiple long-standing interveners. In addition to recommending approval of the stipulation, our rebuttal testimony does respond to several recommendations and findings from PIA staff's witnesses regarding the company's management decisions. Notwithstanding their support of the stipulation and their recommendation that this commission approve the stipulation as written, PIA staff's testimony identified certain management decisions as imprudent and ultimately leading to additional costs and delays. Each of these issues have been fully documented and debated over the course of the VCM process, and the company maintains that its decisions and the costs incurred were prudent and reasonable. Next, our rebuttal testimony addresses intervenor concerns with the broad-based constructive stipulation reached in this case. Any claim that this stipulation was reached by a non-inclusive process lacks merit. To the contrary, this historic stipulation was signed by a highly diverse group of stakeholders who represent a cross-section of Georgia Power's 2.7 million customers. Many of these parties have participated in the semi-annual VCM process for years, and all parties engaged in bona fide, good faith, give and take negotiations to reach a stipulation that was agreeable to all. Further, any claim that the stipulation truncates the prudence review process is also meritless. The purpose of the VCM process was to enable the commission to review and approve the project's costs, along with schedule revisions throughout the life of the project. To date, there have been 29 semi-annual VCM proceedings, all of which have been open and transparent. The construction monitoring process has involved thousands of pages of documentation and countless hours of review by this commission and staff. Put simply, with this robust and open VCM process, all issues raised by PIA staff, consultants, and interveners throughout this process have been thoroughly documented and considered. Lastly, a rate impact study is not necessary for this commission to determine that the stipulation is reasonable and prudent. As with any rate request, Georgia Power carefully considered and worked to mitigate the customer impact associated with the request in this case. We understand that any rate request impacts our customers, and we take this impact seriously. As evidenced by the broad-based support for this stipulation, the stipulation strikes a reasonable balance between the costs needed to construct Vogtle Units 3 and 4, units that will provide Georgians with clean, safe, reliable, and affordable energy for the next 60 to 80 years, with the cost impact to customers. And as further evidence of the company's commitment to mitigate the rate impact to customers, the stipulation also expands the company's customer assistance programs to a broader base of customers. In closing, in light of the testimonial reports filed in this prudence proceeding, the substantial and robust record developed throughout the 29 VCM proceedings, and the broad-based stipulation that resolves all issues before it, we respectfully request that the commission approve the stipulation, find the capital and construction cost of $7.562 billion to be reasonable and prudent, and approve the company's proposed recovery amounts. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have questions, please? Mr. Ambridge, I would like to ask you to summarize your summary. By doing so, I want you to take numbers, the accumulation of those VCMs that this commission went through over a period of time, all the years. And that indicated the times that costs were put over into future prudency reviews. And when we got to the end of it, the total of the cost that the company, the management of the project said, this is the prudence review cost. These are the numbers of the expenses. Then in this stipulation agreement, there was those numbers came down because of reasons. Was it Georgia Power that put it in there? Was it the interveners that put it in there? But I want you to go down through that. And then at the end of that, what the stipulation says and the amount that's in the stipulation, I want to hear what Georgia Power says is going to be the rate impact at the kitchen table.
Okay, so Georgia Power, for its share of the project, spent $10.2 billion. Before we reached any stipulated agreement, we already made the decision to forego recovery of about $1.5 billion. So our request would have been close to $8.8 billion. The reduction in that request accounted for things that we've discussed today, like the spent fuel pool repair, inspection records that were not completed, the IEEE electrical installation, poor productivity of construction, schedule delays. So even before we went into the stipulation or the facts of that stipulation, Georgia Power Company had already elected to forego recovery of those costs. Then we went into the stipulation, and through the stipulation, that number from $8.8 billion of construction and capital costs was further lowered to $7.562 billion. That is nearly or almost $3 billion of construction capital costs that Georgia Power has agreed not to seek recovery of as a result of the stipulation. In fact, with this commission's decision in VCM 17, the estimate of $7.3 billion was deemed reasonable. And so we heard the staff yesterday talk about how do you get from 7.3 to $7.562 billion. I think their math is a good representation. It's ad valorem tax that we're paying to state municipalities. It's the cost of Georgia Power's share of the COVID pandemic. And then it's of course, it's the cost of the independent monitors, which we absolutely do need to look over the project. And so that's how we got to $7.62 billion. Furthermore, we think about the controls that this commission has put in place. And if you will, from a company perspective, it was seen as a penalty on the return on equity that was allowed through NCCR and the capitalized AFDC that we talked about yesterday. That amounted to almost $2 billion of savings to customers just over the past 5 years. And it will amount to hundreds of millions of dollars savings for not going into rates and not being capitalized as part of this project. So you take all that into consideration, and I think this stipulation, as I've said a couple times over the past 2 days, is a fair and balanced and reasonable outcome to these proceedings.
And the end of the results of that is going to be, as I asked for.
Yes, sir.
What impact is it going to have at the kitchen table?
Okay. So when Vogtle Unit 3 went online, our rates were adjusted in August of this year by 3.2% for the retail jurisdiction, retail customers. Average residential customers, the average residential customer, the bill went up $5.42. The month after Vogtle Unit 4 goes online, if the stipulation is approved as written, that will be a 5% increase net of NCCR going away to retail customers. The residential customer, the impact there is $8.95. So in total, we're looking at a net impact once NCCR goes away of 8%. If you include the amount that's already in rates for NCCR, it's a close to 10% impact.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Georgia Power. I mean, Georgia Public Service Commission. Excuse me.
No questions, Mr. Chair.
Concerned ratepayers of Georgia.
Morning, Commissioner McDonald. Commissioners. Good to see you guys again.
Good morning.
Thank you. Yesterday, raised the point where, and kind of he parroted also what you said with Mr. Womack, where he mentioned that he understood that the rating, that, excuse me, Vogtle would cost a lot of, potential pain, and they were doing everything they can to basically improve productivity and looking for ways to improve their performance. And then a few months later, in the AP article in May of 23, he said Vogtle was a great success in spite of its costs. So my question is this: going forward, how is Georgia Power ever going to get control of its future capital costs without first acknowledging and then dealing with the past mistakes?
Mr. Chairman, this question doesn't revolve at all about Vogtle, nor does it revolve around Commissioner McDonald. This question doesn't have anything to do with Vogtle specifically as part of the question, and certainly doesn't have anything to do with the rebuttal testimony of this panel.
May I respond? Basically, it has everything to do with Vogtle, because if they have intrinsic mistakes in their way of dealing with capital projects, it's reasonable to assume they're going to have those mistakes going forward. In their IRP that was submitted last year, they're projecting another $10 billion spent over the next 3 years. My question is, given the experience you've had with this capital project, which is similar to other types of capital projects, if you do not learn from the mistakes of the past, are you not destined to repeat them going forward?
Mr. Prevent, how much time are you going to need today? Your questions.
Less than 30 minutes, probably even
30 minutes?
Yeah, or less.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to do something, and unless you scold me, I'm going to give you 30 minutes. And I don't want any objections. I don't want any, you can talk about the communist challenge if you want to, but you got 30 minutes to make your case. Seat yourself, Mr.
Let me set the time.
All right.
Thank you. You've been very generous. I appreciate that. Okay.
I will answer your questions.
I'm sorry?
You can talk about motherhood or whatever you want to.
Okay.
You got 30 minutes.
Thank you, sir. It's fun.
So, Mr. Prenovitz, I believe we actually answered this question yesterday.
Yeah.
We did. We talked about it.
I
It was
believe
one of
you,
your
but-
last questions.
Go ahead.
Do we, what further clarification? do
Say
you
it
need?
again. It's a lot of material came through yesterday and it kind of all merged together. So I'm sorry, I can't distinguish exactly who said what. But yeah, if you'd respond to that going forward, how do you apply? How do we know you're not going to make the same mistakes going forward with your major capital projects?
So
if you don't acknowledge the past mistakes?
As you've mentioned, and as we mentioned a lot yesterday, there were a lot of lessons learned through the 14-year construction of Vogtle Units 3 and 4. And I can assure you and this commission that we're taking everything that we've learned from bringing this project online to our other capital construction projects. Mr. Williams addressed things like project controls and how we track cost and schedule and how we ensure that all of our stakeholders get accurate and transparent information, including this commission and the staff. That is something actually we've done since Vogtle 3 and 4 started, but it's something we're going to continue to do as we build the infrastructure to serve the energy needs of this state. You think about future, a lot of people talked about the future of nuclear in this country and in this state. I can assure you that if nuclear ends up being the economic solution for our customers in the future, we will take every lesson learned from Vogtle 3 and 4 and apply it to that new resource. There are so many lessons and successes of this project that we will ensure that will apply to the future investments on behalf of our customers in the state.
Okay, let's turn to the failures. Basically, a $9 billion to $18 billion total cost overrun for the project. How do we know you're not going to have the same cost overruns going forward with other capital projects?
Can you explain the math of that?
Well, yeah, if you go through the chart I had yesterday, I think it was Exhibit 2. It basically had the original cost. I'm going by, do you have those exhibits in front of you by any chance? Anyway, but by memory, the original cost was 6.1 billion. The final cost after the Toshiba rebate was something like 13 billion. If you put in the stipulation, it went down to about a $5 billion cost overrun. So those are major expenses, and Mr. Rand very eloquently pointed some of those out. So, I mean, you've talked in generalities. We've learned lessons from Vogtle 3 and 4. I'd like to know specifically, these are major cost overruns. They impact your customers' rates. And how do we know that you have incorporated the lessons from Vogtle and are not going to make the same mistakes again going forward? And the $10 billion capital budget that you guys have outlined in these, in IRP 22.
So I think it's inaccurate to categorize as the bankruptcy of a prime contractor as a mistake. That's something that we couldn't control. In fact, I would tell you that the fact that Georgia Power Company negotiated on behalf of its customers and its co-owners with Toshiba, a parent guarantee, then ensure that they were held accountable and our customers got the benefit of that entity going bankrupt was actually a success. That's not a mistake. But that did lead to the project costing more because it took us longer to finish. Furthermore, as we keep on going down, there are other things like changes in regulation. We talked a little bit about Fukushima yesterday, I think, in some of the panels. The NRC, rightfully so, took a step back and paused during the licensing of the units to ensure that Vogtle units 3 and 4 would be safe for the general public and for our customers. I'm not sure if that led to cost increases or not, but it did delay our schedule. That's not a mistake. That's safety. That's paramount importance. You and I talked about that yesterday. It's not a mistake to ensure that all of our projects and our investments are built with the highest amount of quality. So when we have to go back and fix things that didn't meet the high quality standard, that's not a mistake. That's the right thing to do. We take the time to get it done right.
And so what you're saying is cost don't matter.
Didn't say that.
Well,
Cost always matters.
How do you reconcile the two?
And so how I reconcile the two is the fact that Georgia Power Company is foregoing recovery of nearly 30% of the cost that it cost to build this project. How I also explain it is Georgia Power accepted this commission's penalties for its cost of capital that amount to over almost $2 billion in savings for our customers. That's how I account for that.
You still, with all of these adjustments and the STIP, there's still a $5 billion cost overrun from where it started to where it ends up now if the stipulation is approved. $5 billion is an awful lot of money. How going forward, you position yourself, your strategy, your operations, whatever, not to get in that situation again. Let's not call it a mistake. Let's say, how do we avoid that situation going forward, having these massive cost overruns, whatever the reasons are, whoever's responsible, be it somebody going bankrupt or quality, whatever. How do you avoid that?
So what I can ensure you and this commission is, as we see variables change, as events change, we will ensure that we are always doing the right thing for our customers from an economic, safety, and quality perspective.
Okay.
That's how we ensure that we're always spending the money that we ask for recovery for on behalf of our customers in the most prudent and reasonable manner possible.
Okay, we've spent enough time on that. You mentioned Georgia Power responds to staff witnesses, and I think I can summarize this pretty easily. Georgia Power has maintained that the schedule they use, I guess it's called the IPS. What's that stand for? Integrated Project Schedule? Did I get that right? Okay. You're saying that basically going forward, the schedule has always been right. Mr. Grace and Mr. Jacobs consistently said that schedule was not correct. It was unreasonable, unusable. It wasn't, and basically it had a lot of problems. In essence, it led to a lot of cost overruns. Then you go into saying that basically the issues have been fully discussed and debated over the life of the VCM, and I agree with that. You've made your point, George. Grace and Jacobs made theirs. I have not seen any reconciliation between the two positions. I see you guys talking over each other, and then your consultant yesterday basically confirmed what you said. The IRP schedule was good, it was reasonable, et cetera, et cetera. I brought up the question about, are you familiar with the response by Jacobs and Grace? And he said yes, and I think he got a little nervous on that. And basically what he said was, that's his opinion and this is my opinion. So am I right that this issue has not been resolved? It's been discussed, it's been debated. You've stated your position. Grace and Jacobs continually said theirs, but still you're far apart on that point. Is that right?
No, I think you're incorrect because.
Okay, where am I wrong?
It has been resolved.
How so?
Through the stipulation.
No, it hasn't.
Through the stipulation,
they didn't
the
agree.
company.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
I have to learn not to interrupt.
It's resolved all issues between the parties.
I
mean,
totally
that's
disagree.
that's the point of the stipulation.
No, you reached a compromise, right? But I'm saying you got two different positions and you can reach a compromise and say, we're going to accept this amount of money, but still Jacobs and Grace had a very diverse opinion, and what Georgia Power has consistently said. You've never said that, hey, maybe our schedule wasn't that good. Maybe we should have adjusted it a little. Maybe we should have taken the points that Grace and Jacobs made and applied that to ours. You didn't say that. You said, we were right. Then you're saying, we don't agree with Jacobs and Grace, but it's been resolved because of the stipulation. Is that a fair summary?
So, Mr. Prudency,
Yes,
an
sir.
integrated project schedule for a project the size of Vogtle is an extremely complex thing.
Could not agree
right?
with you
And
more.
it is going to have, we're talking about the schedule that's governing the work of thousands of workers each and every day, that has thousands upon thousands of connections between activities when things start and when things finish. It has connections between construction and testing and then turnovers to operations and all these things. So with a schedule that complex, it makes a lot of sense that people have differing opinions about, did we do it correctly or did we not do it correctly? But the fact is that, we believe our integrated project schedule was the right thing to do. It led us to this point where we have Unit 3 in operations and is operating extremely well. And the stipulation resolves that disagreement in a way that is agreeable to both parties.
Well, as you said though at the beginning, right? Nobody gets everything they want. It was a compromise. And I'm not questioning I am questioning the number that you come up with. That's a different issue. It's saying that they were very adamant that basically the way this was managed from a scheduling point of view was imprudent. It led to massive cost overruns, et cetera. Your position was that it wasn't, and so on like that. And that's still, if I asked Jacobs and Grace, which I didn't have the chance to do yesterday, I wanted to, about that, they would have said the same thing because it was in their testimony. So in essence, that has not been resolved. It's kind of, you reached a compromise settlement. Is that a fair summary? You've compromised.
That's the definition of a stipulated agreement. We have compromised. And
Okay.
as Mr. Williams said, reasonable parties with that amount of experience may disagree, especially with the complexity of the project. Having sat in Mr. Williams' seat before, I can assure you that the way we developed our schedules, the way we had our metrics and our reporting ensured that the project management team on site had everything they needed to do to run the project. That's the purpose of an integrated project schedule,
Okay.
to ensure the project management team can make good decisions and have forward-looking thinking and thoughts and decision-making. That's the purpose of the schedule.
I
I
understand.
appreciate that Mr. Grace and Mr. Jacobs disagreed with our approach. It doesn't make it imprudent.
Where does it make it?
Makes it a disagreement.
That led to billions and billions of dollars in cost overruns?
Our scheduling, our project controls gave the project management team what it needed to complete the project.
Okay. And it's my position for years, let me ask you this, then is it true that with unlimited time and unlimited funds, you will get the project done? Which is basically the lessons for Vogtle 1 and 2. It took basically 17 years, it was $8 billion over budget, and they got it done in a good quality way. Same thing here, we're 14 years into this, pick your number, 10, 12, 15, $18 billion over budget, but you got it done in a safe, reliable way. Is that how is that how we want to manage projects going forward? That it doesn't matter how long it takes or how much it costs, as long as we get it done safely?
That's not how we want to manage projects going forward. We want to make sure that's safety first, quality, and within a reasonable time and budget. That being said, every time we had a change in the cost estimate or schedule, and when we came back to talk to this commission, we filed economic analysis that ensured that moving forward with the project was the right economic decision and the best economic decision for our customers.
Okay.
The economics to customers is what matters here.
Okay, and then you had the testimony from Hayat and Collin saying basically 10 of the last 13 budgets or so were grossly inadequate, were wrong and consistently wrong, and it led to bad decisions, bad conclusions, bad recommendations. So in essence, what you're saying is, yeah, you did the best you could with what you had, but what you had wasn't very good and the results weren't very good. Is that a fair summary?
No.
Okay, we'll go on. Page 4. You state all issues raised by PIA staff and its consultants, as well as interveners, that would be us, have been and are being thoroughly considered by this commission in an open and transparent process. Allegations to the contrary are incorrect. Let me, you have the exhibits yesterday, exhibits 5 through 7. I think 5 through 8. Excuse me, 4. Can I give, do you have exhibit 4 through 8? 4 through 7.
You have to give us a second. You said 4 through
7. 4, 5, 6, 7.
I thought you.
4, 6, 7.
I didn't see a 5, 6, or 7, but
I have said if you need them.
we can do our best.
If you need it, I have it.
If you have an extra handout, that'd be
Yeah.
fabulous.
So you have 4, but you don't have 5. I'll give you the 4, 5, 6.
Okay, I have through 4.
Yeah, 4 and 6.
You're welcome to approach them.
Oh,
You're welcome to.
thank you. I'm sorry, sometimes this.
You're fine.
Thank you.
Okay, turn to exhibit 5. That's Commissioner Wise versus Prudency. That's in VCM 17, which is the most critical VCM here. And some of the comments, you said that basically referring to all interventions have been heard, considered and so on, thoroughly considered. But here's what happened in VCM 17. Basically, they did something quoting, this was the article of the AJC, the day before Christmas, by the way, 2017. It said, I did something, running calculations, Commissioner Wise wasn't happy. Quote, in so many ways, Mr. Prudency, you waste the public's time. You waste this commission's time. You're an abomination to this process. I'm sorry, Mr. Eccles isn't here. Commissioner Eccles then motioned to limit Prudency to no more than 30 minutes of cross-examination at any witness. Prudency, why don't you just throw me out? You don't want to hear this. And then yesterday, Commissioner Eccles made the recommendation to Chairman Shaw, let's limit Prudency to 15 minutes. And then when Mr. Shaw stepped aside and Commissioner Eccles took over, it was 5 minutes, then 4 minutes, then you're done. So my question is this, given the history going back from VCM 17 to yesterday, how can you say that all interveners' issues and concerns and so on were thoroughly considered and evaluated in a transparent way?
So I can't opine on the decisions of this commission or their actions here. What I can tell you is, and I think it's been mentioned a few times today and yesterday, if you think about the voluminous record, the amount of hours that we've spent in this hearing room and sometimes remotely of discussing the decisions and the costs of this project. And you think about the amount of testimony that was filed in these proceedings, regardless of the stipulation. The company filed hundreds of pages of testimony. The staff and their consultants filed, it may have approached thousands of pages of testimony. There is a massively complete record. And even you, Mr. Prenovitz, and your witness, Mr. Durand, were able to file testimony and be on record. That is a complete record. That is everybody being heard.
Obviously, I wasn't heard very well in VCM 17, nor yesterday with Mr. Eccles and also, excuse me.
Mr. Prenovitz?
Yeah,
Hey, Mr. Prenovitz, you okay?
I'm sorry.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I could use some water if anybody's got some.
Did you bring me today the
I do.
list of your members?
I have that.
You
Actually,
do?
it's not a membership list because that's not published, but I have the overview of the organization and what they do. Then I have the contact person.
Could you leave that in the executive secretary's office?
I was going to give it to
today?
you after this if you'd like. But
Thank
yes, yes, I did bring that.
Thank you.
I didn't
I've
forget.
got a little water left in mine, would you like?
Oh, thank you.
Don't ever say Georgia Power didn't give you this.
I was just going to do that. Yeah, actually, Allison.
Your clock's ticking.
18 minutes. I'll get it 30. And I appreciate.
I'm keeping the time.
I'm sure you are.
Keep on talking.
Okay. Oh, where am I? Okay. Allegation that prudency review is being condensed, right? Again, you said it's without merit. And then you said here, the length of time, you talked about all of the stuff that you've done over the years, which is true. And so have we. We've also developed and presented hundreds and hundreds of pages of testimony and exhibits and questions and so on like that. The length of time and hearings in this specific proceeding is not indicative of the years of analysis and consideration that's gone into it. Then you went through with basically all the things that you've done, which is true. Okay, could you please turn to Exhibit 4, first paragraph. Okay. With this, and this came from the Court of Appeals ruling dealing with the prudency issue, saying the prudency wasn't the standard. But in the introduction, so I'm going to talk about, it said this. In 1987, Georgia Power filed its request for a rate increase of approximately $800 million with the PSC to group its share of the Vogtle expenses. This was the largest rate increase ever submitted to the commission at that time. It's gotten bigger since then, and resulted in its longest proceedings, 42 days of hearings over 5 months, which is basically 8 weeks and 2 days worth of hearings. So the question is this: how can Georgia Power, this commission, or anyone else justify a 2-day hearing, which this is going to be, dealing with a $32 billion plus project, nuclear, especially when the precedent was set that the largest, basically the largest projects of $8 billion took 8 weeks and 2 days.
So
this is taking 2 days. How do you justify that?
Let's start with what's changed since 1987.
Okay.
There was a certification process for Vogtle units 3 and 4. It was fully vetted. There was an IRP that was conducted to ensure that Vogtle units 3 and 4 was the right economic choice for our customers when Georgia Power proposed it. Next, there were certification proceedings. And then, like we've talked about for the past 15 minutes, there's 29 VCM proceedings. The VCM process was also implemented to ensure that there was record keeping and tracking of decisions that were made on this project as we went along. And then at the very end, you didn't need 2 weeks to establish a record. The idea was to establish a record from day one, so we wouldn't have to go back and recount decisions being made without a record. Further, The proceedings were scheduled for 3 days. Again, I can't speak for this commission. But I can only imagine that if other interveners had gotten up and asked questions, had cross-examinations, that if it took longer than 3 days, we'd take longer than 3 days. Nobody else except Southern Alliance for Clean Energy decided to ask questions.
Yeah, and what was created out of certification with the Vogtle construction monitoring proceedings led to all that transparency. I mean, it led to the independent construction monitor. It led to PIA staff growing and having consultants on site. You know, we talk about 12,000 pages of documentation. We've submitted millions of pages of documentation in this proceeding since 2009 until now. We've answered 6,900 questions in data request format from the staff. So there's a long history, a long record, a very transparent, very open process that we've gone through for over 14 years. So that's why we can reach a settlement with the staff and we can see what each other's issues are all along the way and debate those issues all along the way.
How long did it take to reach that agreement with the interveners and the staff? How long was the process that they go through? I would have asked Mr. Rocher a lot of these questions, but I wasn't allowed to yesterday, so I have to ask you.
I wasn't a party to
Any of you
negotiating that agreement.
were?
It took some time.
How much time?
I'm not sure of the exact
Just
amount.
give me a rough idea.
It took some time. What I would say is that,
A week, a month? a
and
few
so
days?
what I would say, Mr. Prenovitz, is that it probably took to even have to start the conversation of, is this even possible? Probably a number of months. But what I will tell you is everybody knew, including you, that once Unit 4 loaded fuel, the company had its ability to file its prudence request. And everybody knew with this open and transparent process, what that schedule looked like, of where we were thinking about and what the timing was for Unit 4 loading fuel. And with that knowledge and with that transparency, interested parties were able to come together and agree to a very balanced and constructive stipulation.
Well, we were an interesting party and we weren't even part of it. Why not? Nobody asked us. Nobody told us. We didn't know about it. As Mr. Rand said, she had met with Liz Coyle and spoke to her. And Liz Coyle didn't mention to Mr. Rand and she was involved in it. So not everybody, right?
Mr. Prenovitz,
Yes, sir.
you know as well as anybody else, our schedules, and when we were thinking about loading fuel, you could have reached out to us too.
Okay. I didn't precipitate the stipulation agreement and negotiations though. So it would have been if you were talking about, it's an open process for all interveners and I would disagree because we were not involved. We'll go on. Okay. Transparency, page 4, line 14, 15. You mentioned that the process was a transparent process. Okay, first question. Why has there been, and I brought this up yesterday, and why has there been such a long history of extensive redactions, not only from Georgia Power's testimony, but also from staff's testimony, specifically yesterday with Health Consultants, their report, massive pages of reductions. And I said, why is it? And I said, we don't know, we just pass it in and somebody does the redaction. So can you explain that, please?
Yeah, so the redaction process is pretty simple. If items are pulled directly from a trade secret document and put into testimony verbatim, then they're marked as trade secret and redacted. If staff or an intervener wants to remove that trade secret, they can petition the commission or us and ask for that, and we will consider it.
Don't you overdo it with that trade secret thing? I mean, what kind of trade secrets are now at the end of the project?
So we have numerous contracts with subcontractors, you know, our main contractor, people on site. So there could be financial harm to the company if some of that data is out there in negotiations with those subcontractors or other contractors.
We do have an obligation to the vendors and the companies that we contract with to also protect their information. And as Mr. Haswell mentioned, if any intervener wanted to get unredacted copies, there's a method to do that.
Yeah, but my understanding is you can't use the data if you see it. Okay, let me move on. I only got 4 minutes left. You also mentioned, again, the transparencies, and it's open. Let me have you turn to Exhibit CRG 7.
What's the title of
Selected
CRG 7?
financial and operating data 2015 to 2019. Underneath that, Georgia Power Company Annual Report 2019.
Okay.
Got it? Okay. This was neat. You guys have done this for years and years, going way back. And 2019 was the last time you did it. Now, if you turn to CRG Exhibit 6, it's basically a chart that we put together, key financial and operating data. We use this to construct this chart. Okay? In 2020, you stopped publishing it. I sent a data request to Georgia Power saying, hey guys, maybe I missed it. If I did, tell me what page it's on. But if I didn't, I gave them the form, just fill this in. Give me those numbers for 2020 going forward. Georgia Power refused. We filed a motion to compel. Georgia Power refused again. And they cited an erroneous response saying that the Georgia legislature in the 1950s passed a law saying that interveners aren't entitled to discovery, which was wrong because in 1987, we did do discovery. And we did it. So my question is this. Why did you not provide the information? Why did Georgia Power not provide the information to us when we requested it? Right? You probably can't answer it, but Mr. Hewison can if he'd like to.
Mr. Prudency?
Yes, sir.
Your time is up.
I've got.
No, sir, I'm the timekeeper. But because I'm so generous.
Yes, sir.
As an acting chairman right now, and let you set your time that you needed to do this.
Yes.
I'm going to give you 3 more minutes, even though you didn't recognize me when you were talking about being cut off, this and that and the other. But you've got 3 more minutes, Mr. Prudency.
I just need to answer that question. Why didn't you give me the data I asked for?
I wasn't part of that decision. I can't answer the question.
I know, and it didn't happen with you. I mean, your predecessor was the one that stopped doing it.
So I will tell you, not just my predecessor, you are taking experts of SEC financials and SEC Securities and Exchange Commission documents. We made a decision as Southern Company to change our format as allowed by regulation and rule by the SEC.
Okay. I'm not disputing that. I'm just saying I needed the data. I didn't care how you got it to me. And I didn't get it. That's all I have. Thank you. And thank guys. It's good to see you again. I'm done.
See you too.
Thank you, Mr. Prudency.
Thank you, Commissioner McDermott.
Georgia
and
Interfaith
Commissioner
Power and
Shaw.
Light.
I'm sorry?
Take your seat.
Oh, I gotta get my papers together.
Georgia Interfaith Power and Light.
Thanks for the water.
Southern Alliance for Clean Energy. Redirect.
No redirect. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, it's all yours now, sir.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, may the witnesses be excused.
Gentlemen, thank y'all for all your time. I know I mentioned, Commissioner McDonald having the most time here as a commissioner in this country. You gentlemen have a substantial amount of time before us, and y'all have conducted yourselves in the utmost professional manner. And I just want to thank y'all for that, as well as just everyone. But you guys can be excused. I'll just echo that for our staff. I want to say thank you to Tom Bond, Preston Thomas, those who have come before you, Miss Jenny, Jeff Stair had a lot of time in this room on this case. As a non-lawyer involved in this, I feel like I'm in my 5th year of law school. But thank y'all for the folks that have participated, from the public comments throughout the years. But mainly, I just want to thank our staff. I want to thank Mr. Steve Rutger and Dr. Jacobs for all that you've done. I know like I said yesterday, you put your life and everything into this project, and we owe you a debt of gratitude for your hard work on this project, sir.
Thank you very much. My recommendations for the next project will be on your desk. It's been a pleasure, by the way.
Well, Was there anything else that needed to be entered into the record?
No, just to the extent any of Georgia Power's exhibits have not been entered into the record, I ask that they be moved into the evidence, but I believe they have been.
Are there any other housekeeping matters to take up? I will ask the court reporter at this time to make all exhibits a part of the record. And I want to thank y'all for your time. We'll gavel us out. This hearing is adjourned.